What if I told you the best way to figure out how to be successful is to first figure out how not to fail? It sounds a little weird, a little backwards, right? But that's the absolute core of a super powerful mental model from the legendary investor Charles Munger. So today, we're going to explore his completely counterintuitive guide to living a good life, which, get this, he built by first designing a foolproof plan for a miserable one. Okay, let's dive in. It all kicks off with this simple, kind of funny piece of old folk wisdom. At first glance, you might chuckle and think it's silly, but just think about it for a second. The person saying this isn't being dumb. They're pointing out a really profound truth. They're solving a problem by looking at it in reverse. And this one idea, it's the key that unlocks Munger's entire philosophy. And this technique actually has a name. It's called inversion. A brilliant 19th century mathematician, Carl Jacobi, had this famous mantra: invert, always invert. So instead of asking, how can I be happy, you flip it on its head and ask, what would absolutely guarantee my misery? See, by figuring out all those traps and pitfalls and then just avoiding them, you clear the path for happiness to show up. It's a surprisingly powerful way to tackle tough problems, whether you're doing math or just, living your life. Now, Munger didn't just pull this out of thin air. He was actually inspired by a commencement speech from, of all people, the late-night host Johnny Carson. Yeah, that Johnny Carson. Carson laid out a few really simple ways to guarantee you'd be miserable. And Munger, being Munger, immediately saw the genius in this backwards approach and thought, I can build on this. He decided to expand on it and create a true masterclass in what not to do. So, what was this original blueprint for a terrible life? Let's start with Johnny Carson's foundational rules. This is the starting point for guaranteed unhappiness. Carson's list was short, but man, was it powerful. And it was all based on his own tough life lessons. He pointed to 3 surefire paths to misery. Number 1, ingesting chemicals to alter your mood. Number 2, living a life totally consumed by envy. And number 3, holding on to resentment like it's a prize. Munger said that Carson spoke about these with total conviction because he'd tried them all himself and, became miserable every single time. On that first point, Munger adds this chillingly personal story. He talks about his 4 closest friends from when he was young, all of them brilliant, ethical people, just full of potential. But the outcome was just tragic. Alcohol was a major factor in the deaths of 2 of them, and a third became a living alcoholic. His point is that addiction is such a subtle trap. He says the bonds of degradation are too light to be felt until they are too strong to be broken. Just wow. Now, for Carson's other 2 points, envy and resentment, Munger brings in some wisdom from the 18th century writer Samuel Johnson. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures how these emotions are basically self-inflicted wounds. You think you're hurting your enemy, but you're really just poisoning yourself. But Munger was also a realist. He knew that just telling someone to let it go doesn't always work. So he offered this really quirky but weirdly practical workaround. He called it the Disraeli Compromise, named after a famous British prime minister. So Disraeli decided that going after active revenge was just a huge waste of time and energy. Instead, he kept a little list of people who had wronged him, and every now and then he'd look at the list and get a little quiet satisfaction from seeing how life, without any help from him, had a funny way of sorting those people out. It's a clever way to let go of the action, even if you can't quite let go of the feeling. All right, so after confirming that Carson's list was spot on, Munger decided to build on it. He added 4 more prescriptions of his own to create an even more complete roadmap to a life of failure and unhappiness. His 4 additions were: first, be totally unreliable. Second, make sure you learn everything only from your own personal experience. Third, give up the second you face a major setback. And finally, my favorite, the most meta one of all, completely ignore the principle of inversion that we're talking about right now. On that first point, reliability, Munger is crystal clear. If you want to fail, just be unreliable. He says it will literally cancel out all your other good qualities combined. You'll be that clever hare in the story, always getting beaten by the slow but dependable turtles. And to prove it, he tells this incredible story of his college roommate who was severely dyslexic but was also the single most reliable person he knew. That man went on to become the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So the lesson is huge. Reliability can overcome almost any other obstacle. Munger's second recipe for misery is to insist on learning everything the hard way, from your own experience. He argues this is a surefire way to have a pretty mediocre life. The opposite, of course, is what Sir Isaac Newton is talking about here. He basically admitted that his amazing breakthroughs were only possible because he built on the work of everyone who came before him. He learned from others, vicariously. And this just brilliantly illustrates the absurdity of ignoring other people's wisdom. This modern saying about hang gliding is funny, but it makes a deadly serious point. Some mistakes you only get to make once. Drunk driving, financial ruin, joining a cult. I mean, the list of common disasters is long, and the mistakes are almost never original. Learning from the failures of others isn't just smart, it's literally a survival strategy. So Munger's third rule from misery is brutally simple. When life knocks you flat, just stay down. To show the power of doing the exact opposite, he points to the life of the ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus. As his own self-written epitaph says, he was born a slave, he was physically disabled, and he lived in extreme poverty. I mean, talk about a bad hand. Yet through pure resilience, he became one of the most respected thinkers of his time, believing himself favored by the gods. He simply refused to let his adversity define him. Okay, this brings us to Munger's fourth and final prescription for misery, and honestly, it might be the most profound. It's to ignore the very power of inversion we've been talking about. And at its heart, this really means ignoring the need for objectivity and just letting the natural biases of your own mind fool you over and over again. To make his point, Munger brings up Charles Darwin. He notes that Darwin probably wouldn't have been the top student in any of his classes, yet he completely revolutionized science. So how did this turtle outrun all the brilliant hares of his time? What was his secret sauce? It was his method. Darwin practiced a form of radical, extreme objectivity. He knew that the human mind naturally wants to confirm what it already believes. We all do it. So to fight this tendency, he made it a rule to immediately write down and give special attention to any piece of evidence that contradicted his most beloved theories. He was actively trying to prove himself wrong. Think about how hard that is. This quote from Philip Wiley is just brutal, but it perfectly describes the alternative. People who lack that objectivity get trapped by their own conclusions. They start processing all new information through this filter that just protects their original beliefs. As Wiley puts it, they leave zero room to grow. Darwin's method was the direct antidote to this very common human failure. And Darwin wasn't the only one. When Albert Einstein was asked about his own genius, he listed 4 key ingredients. Now, the first 3 are what you'd expect, but look at that last one, self-criticism. For Einstein, that meant constantly testing, attacking, and trying to destroy his own best ideas. It's the exact same principle of inversion, of extreme objectivity that Darwin used. So, after laying out this whole comprehensive guide to guaranteeing your own failure, Munger brings it all home with one final, beautifully backward piece of advice. He wraps it all up with his paradoxical toast. Aiming low? What on earth does he mean by that? He means that instead of getting lost in these big, abstract, fuzzy goals of success, you should aim low every single day. Just focus on the small, daily task of not being an idiot. Avoid envy, be reliable, learn from other people's mistakes, and stay objective. By simply avoiding all of the stupid stuff, you naturally, almost automatically, rise high. And that leaves us with one last thought. Look, this isn't just some fun intellectual game. It's a real, practical tool you can use. So, the question to take away from all this is, what's a big, tough problem you're facing in your own work or your life right now? And what might happen if you just stopped asking how to solve it and instead started asking how you could guarantee it gets worse? The answer might just show you the path forward.